ワン。こんにちは。サステナブルってなに、塩田真弓です。今回は新型コロナワクチンに関するスペシャルインタビューをお届けします。去年の1月、ですね、史上最大のワクチン大作戦をテーマに COVAX という世界の途上国にもこのコロナワクチンを供給するという国際枠組みについてお伝えしました。あれから1年と2ヶ月、私たちはいまだにそのコロナの変異株のその新しい変異株に構えながらも徐々に行動制限は緩めつつあります。この状況をそのCOVAXのキーパーソンがどのように見ているのか話を聞きました。インタビューしたのはCOVAXを推進するGaviワクチンアライアンスのバークレー事務局長です。バークレー氏は4月8日に開かれるCOVAXサミット資金調達の会合を前に来日しました。そして世界のリーダーがロシアによるウクライナ侵略に集中し、パンデミックへの警戒が薄れていることに懸念を示しました。So could you elaborate how much disruption on vaccine supply is caused by the Russian invasion?
So thank you for that question. Of course, it's tragic what is happening in Ukraine right now, and there is a real emergency with the number of refugees that are moving from place to place. And this does create risks for infectious disease as well, as Ukraine was not very heavily vaccinated against COVID and also has other infectious diseases. The real challenge is this emergency has taken the attention of world leaders, and it's really important that we focus on being able to end the pandemic in addition to paying attention to that emergency. So it's keeping both things in mind as we move forward. War is not a very good thing for infectious diseases. And you may know at the last great pandemic 100 years ago, around the First World War, the movement of troops led to a lot of spread of disease. So this is something we have to worry about. Right now, the world is so focused on the acute emergency and the horrible atrocities that are occurring. Health is taking a second line to that, but this will become a factor.
こちらの世界地図ご覧ください。WHO が発表しているワクチンの接種状況です。こちらは1回のワクチン接種をしている人がどれぐらいいるかというものなんですが、緑が濃くなればなるほど接種している人が多い地域、赤に近づけば近づくほど少ない地域、そして赤になると100人あたり人口100人に対して10人未満の人しか接種していない地域になります。こう見ると緑のところが多く、そしてアフリカ大陸でも赤い地域は数としては少ないということが分かりますね。では2回接種になるとどうなるでしょうか。はい、アフリカ大陸でやはり赤いところが少し増えましたね。では3回接種ではどうでしょうか。一気に赤いところが増えましたね。ロシア、そしてウクライナ、東南アジアのエリアにももちろんアフリカにもまだまだ赤いところが多いということがわかります。One side in Shanghai, they are having lockdown now, and the other side, UK, Germany, they decided to go forward with COVID, despite the record high cases.
Well, first of all, many countries have decided that they're done with the virus. But I'm not sure the virus is done with us. And I think we have to keep in mind that we've seen a new variant of concern every 4 to 5 months over the last 2 years. And so I think the challenge for countries is, if they are going to loosen up a little bit, is not to go from a lockdown to having football stadiums with 100,000 people in it, screaming with no masks on. The challenge is to do it in a stepwise fashion and to be able to move backwards if it turns out that the disease is spreading and causing an enormous amount of deaths. It is not over yet. We're only safe when everybody is safe.
Omicron is a little confusing for us because in Japan, most of the people are vaccinated 3 times already, but Omicron is scattering. Everybody's wondering, should we go forward? Like Pfizer CEOs mentioned that people need 4th vaccine, or?
So the original purposes of the vaccines were to protect against severe disease and death. And the current vaccines do that, and do that well. They don't protect well against mild disease and spread of infection. So what we saw with Omicron was people getting infected again, even if they had already disease or been vaccinated, but they had very, very mild disease and didn't go on to severe complications. And that's what the vaccines were designed for. So our colleagues at CEPI, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, and different companies are looking to see if we can make better vaccines that can cover all the coronaviruses, but also that will block transmission. But those vaccines don't exist yet today.
Not yet. When do you see?
I mean, they're working on them, and so we'll begin to see scientific data. Of course, we don't know if they will work yet. So. And you know, it's miraculous how quickly the vaccines we have today were made. The first vaccine was available 327 days after the starting of the research on it, which is the previous record was 4 years.
As a result, after 2 years, plan is not going as you planned before, especially in African countries?
COVAX has been quite successful. We've now delivered more than 1.4 billion doses to 144 countries, have allocated many more, and are in a position to be able to try to deal with some of the inequities we've seen between wealthy and less wealthy countries. So the plan was initially to try to, as close as possible, vaccinate poorer countries at the same time you vaccinated wealthy countries. And we did very well, better than ever in history. So the first COVAX vaccine was rolled out on day 39 after the first vaccine in the world was done outside of a clinical trial. We had plans of hundreds of more millions of doses to be rolled out right after that. But we dealt with vaccine hesitancy and vaccine hoarding, and we also dealt with export bans that stopped the flow of vaccines. And this, of course, created a real challenge as we tried to make sure that vaccines were available to everyone who needed it. In January, there were 34 countries that still had less than 10% coverage. Today, that's 19 countries, and we will work with each country to try to make sure that they have increased the absorption of their vaccines and get to where they want to get to in terms of their coverage. But what we want is countries to have access to whatever vaccines they need going forward, and that means making sure that they not only have access to vaccines, but the systems to be able to deliver those vaccines.
Yes, I'm also expecting what next Japan could do for the world as a country that is taking the G7 presidency next year.
G7 plays a particularly important role because they can set up the systems that are necessary to make sure that we can react quickly next time, even more quickly next time, and have all countries prepared so that this does not take off like this pandemic did. And it's cost the world now more than $12 trillion US. So our hope would be that we will finish this last emergency funding round to make sure that vaccines are available for developing countries, as well as funds to deliver those vaccines, as well as be able to take dose donations from countries that have excess doses. And our hope is that by the end of this year, there'll be a strong enough vaccine coverage that countries will be protected and we can move back towards some normality.